Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first Gala webinar for 2022. We are about to start less than a minute. I just want to give everyone the chance to log in before we start the presentation, so please be patient. In the meantime, if you want, you can write to us in the chat where you are from. Okay. All right. I think we can get started. Okay, so as I said, hello everyone and welcome to today's Gala webinar, the very first of 2022. My name is Isabella Massardo, content strategist here at Gala. And today's webinar is presented by Serge Gladkov, CEO of Logos Global. And he's going to talk about what neural machine translation really is, what it does and what it doesn't do, and how we can use it at its best. And anytime during the webinar, you can use the QA box to submit your questions. As time allows, we will address as many questions as we can. The recording, the webinar will be recorded, and I'll share the link in a follow-up email after the event. In any case, the recording will also be published on the Gala website. Serge, I know you have a very detailed presentation, so I'm going to leave the floor to you. I'll be back in a little while. Enjoy, everybody.
Hello to respected audience. I will mute my video so you can concentrate on screen and not on my face. Welcome to the webinar, The Great MT Reckoning Spring 2022. And thank you for joining and giving me the opportunity to present my view. I hope you will find something useful. Today, I'm going to discuss the state of the art MT technology objectively and hope to answer some complex questions which professionals now in industry often have. These questions are difficult to get answers for due to the complexity of the issues and the overwhelming hype of AI. I apologize in advance for speaking fast because I have a lot of information to cover today, but you can replay the recording and of course, email me with questions. This content is for everyone interested in the practical application of the modern MT technology in the professional environment, and also anyone who wants to find her own place in the new world with new professions, which we're also going to mention. On the slide, you can see a screenshot of the MIT courseware announcement, "The hype is real," saying that today, when a lot is being said about machine learning, data processing, data modeling, analysis and simulation, when you are trying to solve real-world problems, it is very important to understand how these technologies should be applied in practice, when and how to use these technologies, and when not to. That's why we'll talk primarily about the real-world application of this technology in the industry. The topic of MT is usually viewed through black and white glasses or from two different camps of either proponents or skeptics. These two worlds were separated. Scientists were talking to each other, the industry was talking to itself. I'm hoping to take an objective, unbiased position today. On one hand, I will share our real-world experience. On the other hand, I'll consider the essential facts about technology without going into detail too deeply, outlining the key principles. I would like to emphasize that we are talking as insiders with respect to AI and ML. Our team has a dedicated R&D department of researchers and developers, ML engineers, and we're doing cutting-edge research in the field. We develop and release our own AI-based products. We've recently released the parallel aligner tool, which is built on one of the latest AI models, LAPSI, language agnostic BERT sentence encoding, and Facebook FAIS framework. We've also ported to Python and published on pyp.org for everybody for free to use HLEPR automatic translation quality metrics. Further, we have carried out HLEPR customization for particular language pairs and presented this work on recent MT Summit 2021, organized by UNTA last August. More recently, we came up with novel human metric for measuring translation quality of MT output, which we call LogiPEM. It gives quickly, reliable, and very useful results. I'm saying this not for self-promotion. We're using special dedicated marketing channels and other vehicles for that, but only to emphasize that not only do we have vast industry experience, but also a certain knowledge of these technologies. The things we have achieved are concrete and innovative and far from simple. We love this technology, but we don't pray to its artifacts. I'm sure you've seen this slide showing the exponential growth in the amount of information we're experiencing today. And the blue bars in the chart illustrate the explosive growth of data. The brown line is the number of translators, below is almost flat. It grows on the scale is not noticeable, illustrating an almost constant number of linguists capable of processing information for translation. Usually, the enthusiastic speaker asks the question how we can process this growth when there aren't enough translators. In reality, this graph is quite misleading because although there is certainly an increase of information volumes, most of this information explosion is in the form of non-human readable data, of visual form of photos and videos, and 99% of what's left either does not need to be translated at all or is enough to be simply gisted so that the general meaning can be understood. Information which needs to be professionally translated in the form of long texts is created and consumed by people, and the content consuming population is no longer growing exponentially. People's consumption of information has increased, but it cannot grow indefinitely. More than that, people read long text less today than they were before. It is true that the volume of long text for translation is growing, but the actual growth is much more modest than it is shown on this chart. Information explosion has effect on translation, which is often overlooked, but has been mentioned 10 years before by Nicholas Carr in his book, The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. This is famous New York Times bestseller, which I recommend you to read, but the conclusions are our mind changes. The net, with its connectivity, changes the way we think. Today, we're able to consume only much shorter texts. Our attention window is much smaller. The texts have to be much more forceful, accurate, and up to the point, and not only for marketing texts. This has important consequences which relate to our industry. Unfortunately, people are not reading more. Average modern person has difficulty to focus on long materials. I'm sure that you as a very advanced audience will have no problem with the 60 minutes presentation, of course. But in any case, today, you have to create not mediocre, but high impact text to get to people. As professionals, we are interested to what is happening when, with this content as MT deployment spreads. Jaap van der Meer predicts singularity tomorrow, a zero-cost translation. But in reality, all the premises in his statement are incorrect, as well as conclusion. The reality is quite different. On this slide, you see the results of this survey, which Common Sense Advisory made in Q2 last year, surveying leaders of translation companies. As you can see, more than 75% of them on average are optimistic about business growth. It's hard to imagine that kind of growth if tomorrow the production of new translation will cost nothing. Obviously, the universe does not agree with the forecast that we've just mentioned. Even more than that, according to a more recent quarterly survey, the demand for post-editing is decreasing fast, unlike the demand for translation. So the question remains, how is the industry changing when it comes to professional translation? and obviously it is changing. If raw MT costs nothing, which is myth number 1, and post-editing is a cakewalk, myth number 2, will clients put out much more content for translation? Actually, the volumes are growing, but the existing clients are not giving out more sweet content for translation. On the contrary, they're trying to make the current stable volumes cheaper, because if MT is so good, why spend money on translation? As one of the clients has put it, when budgets are cut, all quality concerns are going out of the window. Even smart clients are torn between understanding of the shortcomings of machine translation and the overwhelming desire for savings and speed. It's more difficult for localization managers than ever to make budget owners see high-quality translation as investment and not as expense. As we can see, there is no simple relationship. Very complex currents are formed by many different forces at play. Looking at major trends and what has been happening in recent years, we see that MT enthusiasts are saying a lot of attractive things about an MT, but for every statement on the left, there is serious rebuttal. We all know that MT is applied more frequently than ever, and content translated by MT exceeds by far the volume touched by professional linguists. But at the same time, growing number of customers does not want to apply MT. There are sectors, industries where human expertise is of utmost importance. Large IT customers are post-editing, but some large customers with MT ownership do not apply their own MT for mainstream content. MT often works so well that you can publish raw MT. Yet even when an MT works very well, there is a poison cookie problem. MT is everywhere, but the quality is going down. There is no more good data. There are many MT options, but why are there so many engines? Obviously, because none of them is good enough. MT saves a lot of supply chain costs, but MT training and research is so expensive, some companies are abandoning their own MT research and signing up with Google. Translators have to adapt and change, but translators have been always using MT, so there is absolutely nothing new here. We will simply post-edit, but post-editors are hard to find. There is no good post-editor training available, and the reason is wrong post-editing paradigm, which came from SMT era, which I will mention later. We're doing everything with MT now, and the quality of final deliverables is worse than ever. This is a complex landscape indeed. Let's have a look one more time on the hype cycle and adoption cycle plotted together. Where are we now? This is not a simple question because there were several MT technologies that repeated this cycle one after each other. And I was thinking to draw a superposition of these cycles myself until I saw precisely the same chart in Philippe Cohen's book of Neural Machine Translation. I was stunned to see how this chart is similar to what I pictured for myself. You see many hype cycles in the past, but as far as the latest MT cycle is concerned, it looks like in reality it runs much slower than the hype because more realistic view is more and more prevailing. Why signs of disillusionment if AI is so good? Here you can see the XTM Cloud screenshot with MT results from two well-known engines. Amazing fluency as compared to previous MT incarnations. Reads well. Unfortunately, these translations are incorrect. This is roughly what BET translator can do, and there's about 20% of such segments, 20% of translations are completely incorrect, and about 30% are editable. A natural conclusion, naive conclusion, would be that this only requires a slight touch. Unfortunately, in reality, this is not so easy for a large number of serious reasons, as we will explain further. The problem with NMT is that being fluent by design of most frequent occurrences, even the best proposals are always literal and often incorrect. In his already mentioned book, Neural Machine Translation, Professor Cohen gives an example of German sentence, which is taken from WMT 2017 dataset. The sentence has human reference translation. Professor Cohen runs through several completely incorrect NMT proposals and concludes the section with much better example, which he says is fine translation, even though it's different from human translation. This translation is made by the modern state-of-the-art NMT in blue here, and you can check it yourself that current Google, DeepL, modern NMT provide the same translation. Now we are human professional translators, and as we see this example, there are two things that are creeping into reviewer's mind while looking at this sentence. To check it, I have found the source paragraph of this context. If you read through the paragraph, the suspicion is confirmed. The meeting eventually did not happen. That's why human translator correctly chose was also planned to cover in the past, and from a wider context of the political knowledge, he has also was aware that discutirte was not just discussed, but disputed, a hot contradictory question. Now, as you can see, neural machine translation model used present tense where the meeting is in the future and simply translated discutirte as discussed. We will explain why this happened later, but for now, let's say that an NMT proposal gives an idea of what the source is about quite well, but this translation actually contains two minor accuracy errors, which may or may not pose a risk of misunderstanding and misinterpretation for the certain audiences in certain situation, for example, in diplomatic context. And this is example of, as NMT proponents think, is a very good translation. Practitioners see this every day when NMT generation is presented to them for post-editing. This is, for example, a response of an LSP to one of the leaders of NMT implementation reporting its success to conferences around the world. These reports of amazing successes are great, but production has to deal with reality. This email reads, unfortunately, we will have to decline post-editing with this level of NMT quality because it turns out by no means less labor-intensive than translation from scratch. NMT was unusable to the point where it's easier to retranslate. So the realization comes from that applying NMT is not so easy. Understanding of the real deployment problems becomes deeper. Awareness of the real cost of implementation at desired production and process quality level, awareness of real technological problems, awareness of fundamental limitations of technology, feeling of the real problems in the industry, evidence of pitfalls accumulation, and overall the realization that a self-propelled furnace has not yet been built. Professor Antonio Terral from the Netherlands was the first to debunk statements of human parity. He did this with the simplest means of very primitive parameters, lexical variety and lexical density. But are we talking about one or two articles? Nope, we are talking about all of them. Recently, an article entitled Scientific Credibility of NMT Research, a meta-evaluation of 769 papers, received an Outstanding SEL Paper Award. It was the first large-scale study of NMT research. Researchers analyzed the quality scores of 769 papers for 10 years from 2010 to 2020. Their conclusion is the pitfalls of research papers are accumulating. The reason is, unlike in physics, in data science, it is very difficult to repeat other people's work. NMT researchers use inadequate metrics, and they copy incorrect conclusions and results from each other with groupthink without critical thinking or verification. Gradually, they just copy errors from each other, and over time, NMT evaluation worsens. Accumulating pitfalls means that it looks like a lot of results and conclusions have to be questioned or revisited. The recommendation that authors are giving is that on every paper, the following question must be asked. Is a metric that better correlates with human judgment than blur used, or is a human evaluation performed? The automatic metrics or human metrics made with crowd do not reflect NMT quality. In reality, the NMT quality is not ideal. When asked if the singularity is close, we would answer that singularity is not even theoretically visible. We clearly see another wall. As simple illustration, this is what the biggest enthusiasts of machine translation think. In particular, the founder of Intenta, discussing GitHub Copilot, states, this is one of the recent posts, that the most perfect neural model, GPT-3, cannot create anything really new. It is good at combining content already created by humans. But if, for example, tomorrow a new API will be released, until people write code for this API, the model will not create anything for it. The question arises, why do we expect a neural model to be able to generate any translation and create a new translation? In fact, we all know that it does generate it, as everyone can see, but in a nutshell, how does it do it? Does it always generate it correctly? How accurately? And where mistakes are coming from? We'll try to answer this question later, but for now, we'll note that much of the problem lies in the quality the user expects from translation. The question about what the neural model generates is simply one about the quality of translation. Some people say, look, it's great, but others say, come on, one error is riding upon another here. Thus, the question of measuring the quality of translation becomes very acute. Two extreme approaches to quality are measure carefully or disregard completely. As of recently, we have started to hear something that was not heard before, that translation quality does not have to be measured at all. Let the users decide. You need to measure something else, for example, orders. You don't even know what translation quality is. It'll do just fine. We had a case where consumers like poor quality better. This literally has been said. It's too complicated. No one knows how to measure it. And the new one, translation doesn't have to be accurate. Suspicion that this has been said in order to sell you something substandard and actually something very expensive is not without ground. Common sense calls to verify such claims, even if you are okay with good enough quality, and at minimum to ask good enough for what. You still need to understand whether you are okay with major errors presented in translation, and even if yes, how many of them can be there. You probably want to maximize your impact on the audience. Even if it is not a marketing material, but the audience are professionals, experts in the field, and deal with complex SME, then there is a need to understand what we're talking about, the need for translation to transfer meaning correctly and comply with special terminology. You also need to assess if the risk of mistranslation and harm are not too high. Today, any material, even the non-marketing, is to break through the user through a very narrow attention window. In a nutshell, there are two undeniable reasons to measure translation quality. First of all, to check if we're making progress, we need to measure quality. Philip Cohen said this in his book. If you are a buyer of translation, you need to be able to verify what it is that you are buying. It is not too difficult to make some content and train some AI model, and it will give you some result. Question is how to evaluate what you are getting. And beware of the fact that Mechanical Turk ground quality evaluation are biased toward MT because uneducated common folk does not see the errors and favors literal incorrect translations over good and correct human translations, which is a proven fact. Quality has to be evaluated by translation professionals and not by the crowd. So the quality is important because if quality doesn't matter at all, if reputation doesn't matter, if it doesn't matter what people think of your business and how they understand your business obviously isn't successful. Buying rotten tomatoes is not a saving, but waste of money and reputation. There is also one major philosophical reason to care for quality. In my favorite sci-fi book on Brothers Strugatsky, 1 Billion Years to the End of the World, when scientists move toward the scientific progress, the universe itself tries to deter and contain him with a series of unexpected events. This phenomenon was mentioned by Albert Einstein. There is a race between mankind and the universe. Mankind is trying to build bigger, better, faster, and more foolproof machines. The universe is trying to build bigger, better, and faster fools. So far, the universe is winning. In the book, Malyanov did not surrender to the universe. He accepted the challenge. As humanity moves through the breakthroughs, his scientific progress, we need to resist the drive for simpler, more inadequate translations presented as replacement for correct professional translation, because temptation not to think, not to pay to human professionals for their human work is just too big. Today, already admission to translation majors suffers. Students who do not believe that translation as profession has future. Translators will be even harder to find. If we don't push for high quality human translation, there will be no one to produce good translation. It's an existential crisis. And as we will see, if we don't resist it, then we will see more and more of this, and ultimately only this. Although this is very funny, unfortunately, we're talking not about some isolated blunders and a couple of funny screenshots. Things are trickier. Many say machine translation can be used, but gross errors may occasionally occur. This statement is misleading, if not completely wrong, and we will explain why. For now, let's move on to the question of why the data in the 769 articles about NMT isn't very reliable. One of the main reasons is because until recently, automatic metrics were used to measure MT output quality. I'm sure you heard about BLEU. This figure shows a diagram of correspondence between the BLEU score and the human translation, quality score. You can see from this picture that there is actually no correspondence. If we remove 5 outlier dots in the bottom left corner, we'll see almost perfect circle, which means that there is no correlation at all. When MT quality was poor, BLEU showed progress of MT training, but new situation is completely different. We will mention the recent research paper providing that. Not to mention the fact that the same BLEU number of different systems means different things. You cannot compare BLEU created under different conditions, including different language pairs. Translations with lower BLEU are often incorrect. But things are even worse because human judgment is not at all what machine translation researchers have thought it is. It's not a mechanical Turk evaluation. This is not an evaluation by anyone, but a professional evaluation according to certain quality metrics built with customer specification in mind. As the quality of machine translation has improved, and as Google continues to improve its algorithms, a recent study of Google research published in April last year found that the old method of measuring translation quality used the mechanical Turk and virtually no correlation with the professional evaluation of translation quality with human judgment. The study was based on recent research in the field of professional translation, and the evaluation is based on MQM. Google has invested a serious amount of money in human evaluation of large data sets. And already this year, the WMT shared metrics task is asking for comparison of quality metrics with human evaluation by MQM and PSQM. You can read more of this about this in our blog. To understand from a bird's eye view why and how the quality of MT have greatly improved and why at the same time the singularity will not come tomorrow, to understand where the limit is and what are the limitations of this technology are, let's have a peek under the hood of neural NT through the 5 slides of Professor Zolowitz's presentation lecture, which is publicly available in Open MIT course. And I'm quoting this on permission of Professor Zolowitz. Machine translation has always been based on the idea of taking the entirety of language and building a machine to translate on this basis. The semantic approach to describing the rules of language and building dictionaries has proved itself to be quite laborious and expensive. However, alternative approaches have always existed. In particular, scientists have broken down the text into fragments of word combinations, the so-called n-grams, and tried to build a text generator based on how often certain word combinations occur. They took all of the Shakespeare text, for example, which is almost 1 million words forming a very recognizable language, and found out an amazing thing. By simply analyzing the frequency of n-grams, if you use quadrigrams, you'll get an amazingly Shakespearean text. That is, there is something to this idea. It is not necessary to analyze linguistic constructions, but you can work with word usage. The Moses statistical engine was built on the basis, which produced mediocre translation, but the cost of building a language engine did not require a description of all the grammar of the language and its entire vocabulary, which costs about $500,000 per language. You can just take the corpus and build a statistical model on it, and in 10 to 15% of cases, the sentence will be quite good. Another 40% will be editable. For real work, of course, this is not good enough. But then in 2016, Tomasz Mikolov, a Czech person, came up with a new way to capture word usages. He invented the word-to-vec algorithm in which the neural network turns each word into a vector of numbers, ranging in size from 200 to 500, depending on which words are next to each other. The following hypothesis was tested. Words that are used in a similar context are probably semantically similar. This hypothesis, which is not entirely true, was confirmed, and it revealed something exciting. The space constructed in this way is semantic space in a very important way. Not only does it preserve vectors of similar words that are close within that space, but their relationships are also preserved. Consider the well-known example of the vector in which woman relates to the vector man in the same way as the vector king relates to the vector queen. If you subtract from the vector king the difference between a man and woman, you get the queen. Later, several more and more complex algorithms for generating embeddings were created in order to even better capture word usage. All these algorithms are variants of metric factorization, whereby a very complex object is represented as a product of two matrices of smaller dimension. But to build good embeddings is only to halve the battle. Language is ambiguous, and the same words can have different meanings in different places in the sentence. In 2017, Google Research released an article, Attention is All You Need, which describes the transformer algorithm, a neural network architecture that takes an input sentence, generates embeddings of individual words, and then captures the position of the word in the sentence and looks at all the words in the sentence to determine which word the current word refers to. There are several such attention heads working in the transformer, each fixing its attention on a different part of the sentence. So the algorithm correctly determines, as an example in the lower right, which word refers to it in that sentence, for example. This is how the decoder works. The result is then fed into the input of generator, which, please listen carefully, generates the output probabilities of the words in the target language and selects the appropriate words and generates the translation. The key here is generates the output probabilities. This algorithm has already demonstrated a significantly better results. It was so interesting that the world began to talk about the breakthrough in this area and the basis model BERT created. The big models built on these ideas have produced surprisingly good results in text generation, and they have made quite a splash. Then this architecture was scaled up to a ridiculous degree with the hope of achieving better results. Look at this, the model size growth exponentially. In 2021, it's 530 billion parameters. Unfortunately, the quality is not scaled as quickly. The complexity and difficulty also grows exponentially. In fact, the closer you want to go to the good quality, the more exponentially expensive and difficult it becomes in the world of AI. To halve your current error rate, you need X times more money, with X being a model strength, and language problems are the most difficult to crack. What we have just reviewed should be enough to see something that all the scientists and engineers know very well. They understand the fact about that this technology, this engineering solution does not think. You've heard people question, what difference is it whether it thinks or not? Well, it does make great difference because we need to know how it works to understand the limits, what it can and cannot do. And the limits are good quality of MT output is not guaranteed. The result varies significantly depending on the engine model, language pair, training data, domain, type of content, and many other things. These stars must be really well aligned for particular mechanism to produce acceptable results in particular concrete situation. Professor Peter Zolowitz at the end of the lecture, 5 slides of which we've just visited, said, is just numerology that is trained through the stochastic gradient descent method, a wonderful engineering solution, but it has nothing to do with all that we know about language, and it's unclear what it has to do with intelligence. It's very politically correct, unclear what it has to do with intelligence. Here's the translation in plain language. Wonderful technology, but it has nothing to do with intelligence. Very often we hear, more data, better models, and it will improve. But there is one huge, biggest problem of data-driven methods, sparsity, and it's worse than you think. The problem is that words are not distributed uniformly in the corpus. The word distribution is governed by empirical Zipf's law, which predicts that no matter how big a corpus is, there will be very many rare words in it. For example, in Europarl 30 million words corpus, and in fact in corpus of any size, there is a large tail of so-called singletons, the words that occur only once, and there are lots of them, 33,000 words, which are in fact words from active vocabulary of average person, such as cornflakes, mathematician, and Bollywood. Getting larger corpora will increase the frequency of the words, but reveal previously unseen words with low counts. Zipf's law is always cited as the strongest argument against purely data-driven methods. It is therefore incorrect to say that as we take large corpus, we will get all necessary data for translation. We won't. A human need to be told only once that a Yushinja is a new kind of fish to be able to use this word in all kinds of different ways. The NMT cannot do this no matter how big the training corpus is. Yet, sound familiar to technical translators, isn't it? New terms, terminological research, terminology glossaries are becoming even more important, as well as competent human subject matter experts. Okay, rare words are a problem, but the majority is handled well? Not quite. The deep learning stands on three pillars: the data, the code, and the model. Let's go one step further into mechanics of NMT on already provided example from Philippe's Cohen book. To the left of the example, you will see the word predictions of neural translation model as they're taken from under the hood of NMT. Remember, the words in the prediction are chosen according to the frequency of occurrence in the corpus in similar company. For example, the prediction example, the word believe in taken because it has probability 68% of occurrence in similar situation of the corpus and chosen over think and feel. This helps to choose the most correct translation on average, but it also gives the most mediocre translation, which becomes problematic with ambiguous words and terms. And of course, there is no intelligence here whatsoever. That's precisely why the model did not use disputed and use discussed as an example to the right, which is the most often occurrence, and chose incorrect temporal construction should also focus. Neural network is cleverly choosing most frequent words from the corpus, not most meaningful, because there is no intelligence here at work, human or artificial, purely highly sophisticated statistical method generating by design most mediocre words combination, optimizing fluency at the expense of accuracy. So the challenges of neural NMT are poor out-of-domain performance, hallucination, the output is fluent but completely inaccurate, unedited MT is a trap, fluent does not mean accurate even in domain, low resource language problem, noisy training data quickly leads to significant quality degradation, NMT learns to copy well, but with noise, it's learning bad things. Poor performance on rare words. Neural model are not very interpretable. The answer to the question why the small changes in training data lead to different model decision is buried in large matrices. There are no obvious knobs to turn and kinks to straighten. Fluency is good, but not ideal either. Lexical choice caused by ambiguous word sentence, as well as complex semantic relationship, as expressed in preposition and pronouns, are still a major concern for MT today, as Professor Cohen states in his book. In fact, this is exactly what the MIT article said right after GPT-3 appeared. A greatest trick AI ever pulled was convincing the world it exists. That's because the GPT-3 is amazingly fluent, but it doesn't have a grain of intelligence. This trick, of course, was pulled by humans. We tend to humanize objects around us. For example, primitive peoples humanized the sea, wood, and stones, and now we do the same to machines. Saying that AI exists is a cargo cult. It's like dancing around a plane made of straw and hoping that the god of helicopter, in which white people used to bring coke and cigarettes, will solve any problem such as preventing the hurricane. There are more recent and more scientific reviews that in October 2021, the Journal of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers published an extensive collection of dedicated articles collectively titled The Great AI Reckoning. I do recommend reading the entire collection, but as you can see, even the titles of many of these articles are telling. Many will remember the thought experiment in which 100 monkeys sitting in pianos could produce Mozart melodies in 100 years' time. Now we have managed to control probabilities better, but as Alyosha Burkhardt from DFKI said, MT is a parrot, a clever parrot, but still a parrot. A parrot can be useful, but you have to keep its limitations in mind. Example of GPT-2 primed with Bible on the right-hand side here, this slide, give you Ninja Master and Virology. Here's another post of one of Intento founders who is mocking alarmists of AI apocalypse, saying that we should not show this picture of similarities between parrot and machine learning algorithm and suggests to use matrix multiplication instead of AI to alleviate their concerns. Ančić says that this picture describes the current and foreseeable status of AI a little bit more than completely. So the similarities between the parrot and ML neural model are here on this slide. After the tsunami of hype of AI, it came as a shock to some that complex self-training AI chatbot was observed to drift snap on its own, to make racist remarks, so that it has to be shut down. The phenomenon of NMT hallucinating is very well known. People, however, are so misled by the term AI that it came as a surprise to them that AI can misinterpret the meanings of words and phrases, as Timney Gebru mentioned in her report, which she was writing when she was fired. But of course, it should not come as a surprise. The comment from engineer is, of course it can. These models are just systems, quite complex, for processing raw data directly into a product, entirely without any interpretations, meanings, and other crutches that humans with a universal but physically frail intellect use. Clearly, if such systems had a machine gun hanging from their output instead of harmless laughingstock attraction, the trouble would be inevitable. And do you think that a machine gun is a metaphor? Nope. As one internet user observed some time ago, the company that was making robots quickly went from dancing robots to mounted assault rifles and robotic dogs. Why this picture here? It illustrates the thought that it is very important to understand not only the technology, but also how this technology is used and to what effect. It is not guaranteed by default that wonderful technology will be used properly or will lead to happiness. I prepared a little quiz for you. Those of you who will answer correctly, what does Dune movie? This is a picture from Dune movie, has to do with the topic of this presentation, will get a prize. There is a neural model, Delphi, which attempts to resolve ethical problems. If you still have doubts, you can ask Delphi itself. On the right here, you see questions and answer, and clearly the AI said its word, no more discussion. Very funny. So one super important thing to remember for practical application of MT is that you need to review 100% of MT output for accuracy and meaning transfer, because this numerology trained by stochastic gradient descent method does not and cannot by design and in principle check the meaning. Here on the slide, we see a very funny example of T9 in Ukrainian language. And notably, you know for yourself that the quality of T9 does not improve. To the right is an example of text generation by Microsoft Office when the proposal is my previous emails. Well, I was going to write something completely different. As Rafaela Buchaza from Salesforce, a very advanced company, puts it, MTK can say Thursday instead of Sunday, tomorrow instead of yesterday for no reason. It has hallucinations. We're not talking about human parity here, except for the segments that are not edited. Let's spell the difference between translation memory and machine technology and machine translation. TM can produce previously completed high-quality translations, including similar ones. 100% matches need to be checked much less if translation memory is good. The NMT can create new word sequences that are not in the training corpus based on word usage in that training corpus. How well it does it is precisely what determines the quality of the model. But how the model does it has to be checked, and you need to be able to do this reliably. It's a mechanical process. MT does not analyze, does not check the meaning. Deep learning requires a very good model, vast amounts of good, clean data. The quality of the model drops quickly if the training corpus is dirty, incorrect, limited, or quality evaluation has been done incorrectly. Output quality depends on this and many more other situational factors and constraints. We already mentioned the reasons why the neural models have problems from scientific point of view. Here on this slide, the problems are listed from linguistic points of view. I don't have time to run through all of the fundamental problems on MT here visible to linguists. But roughly speaking, the problems of the technology are caused by its advantages. For example, fluency which is often perceived as free manipulation with synonyms and using alternate words here and there, means that there is a problem with terminology caused by the very design of the model. These problems are listed in the detail in the article on our website, and there are more than 13 of them. It will be soon updated with the new knowledge that we're constantly getting. Perhaps the most profound misconception is that a cheap, unskilled resource is sufficient for post-editing. This came from the old world of statistical machine translation and is already obsolete, and this is not correct. Now, the reality is, post-editor of neural machine translation should check the meaning, follow the terminology. It is a must to review 100% of the material, verify accuracy of relaying the intended meaning of the source, because distortions of meaning and accuracy errors are often masked by literal translations. The post-editor must be a translator. The post-editor must understand the subject matter area. You have to care for consistency, style, and language to ensure high impact. With MT, the post-editor must be an experienced translator to realize productivity benefits without reducing the quality of results in translation memory, which is both a knowledge base and the training corpus. Now you have to review 100% and review very carefully. That is, the volume of editing as such has increased. Salesforce, a very advanced company, disclosed on an MT summit that on average 36% of strings did not require any modification, but it is only a best case scenario, and you need to review all 100% and fix 74% of the content first in order to find out what that unedited portion is. This is not possible without significant human work. Linguistic similarity and semantic similarity are two different things, and this is one more reason why human editor has to review the MT output. In the upper left corner, you see the distribution histogram of human ratings. In the lower left corner, the same data set is shown as per its causing similarity by Lapsi. Humans see the meaning errors, while linguistic similarity only shows closed sentences. But even one comma can change the meaning completely, not to mention more serious things. Currently, there is no automatic algorithm to measure human perception of quality. In a nutshell, neural machine translation output looks great until you start reading it, because there is no way to measure quality with automatic metrics. With or without the reference translation, many are trying to base their decisions on edit distance. It does sound plausible that the amount of effort the translator is making somehow correlates to the number of keystrokes needed to fix a given sentence. Unfortunately, this assumption also fails. Here in the chart, you see the plot of edit distance versus quality score for every sentence in a document of more than 100 sentences. Would you say that the straight line approximation approximates the scattering? In my opinion, the straight red line is much more informative here, because it says that fewer than 150 keystrokes will be enough to fix just about any sentence. The dispersion of sentences with high quality scores is really huge, and sentences with low quality scores also require low number of keystrokes to fix them. So the edit distance tells us nothing about translation quality. There are many things that can go wrong with neural MT, just with like any ML data science model. For example, blur is almost always inflated because the testing corpus is not cleaned correctly. We can't get into the details of this slide due to the time limit, but you're welcome to get back to me on the issue of cleaning the test corpus and measuring the results of MT. Both of them are, of course, very important. If you can't measure quality of the output properly, you can't train to evaluate the model correctly, and therefore you wasted time and money because it's not clear at all how good your model is for your case and your content. Because even the best trained models are not precise. They always will produce errors, and proper training is quite important. Some root causes of incorrect training are incorrectly selected data. Domain IT is not a domain, which you can explain more. Dirty data using market available data led to net degradation of quality. Overtrained or undertrained AI model, incorrect quality metrics used, inflated blur score, not reflecting the real quality of the model. It is a well-known fact that AI/ML-based applications are difficult to implement and deploy in production. 80% of AI implementation projects fail, and the reason is the complexity of this technology. Big data are required, clean and good data are required, training data cannot be empty results, data processing tools and techniques are required, data stewards, engineers are required, engineers and developers are needed, ML engineers, ML ops are needed, solution and process architects are essential. You need to measure translation quality reliable. So the myth that MT is a zero-cost business is quite widespread. Google Translate is cheap and completely free, while in reality, stock models have clear limits. And custom models require lease of computing power, collection management, cleaning of existing dataset, purchase of dataset, cleaning the new batches of data, quality verification, periodic training and retraining, cost of in-house team of ML engineers, ML ops teams and programmers, special linguists, complex methodological and practical work on quality control, maintaining the model, not to mention expensive subscriptions. All this is a lot of money. That's because the question of ROI is raised more and more in discussions about MT implementation. Ford just signed a service contract with Google and no longer trains its own models. It's now forbidden for Ford under this contract with Google. To improve the situation with quality measurement so as to measure the quality of machine output more accurately, we ported HLeopard to Python and published it, allowing everyone to use it. We also did something that no one was ever done before. We implemented the ability to train CacheLeopard on a language pair using reference data, making it more accurate. Here's our poster from WMT21 shared metrics task, which demonstrates that trained CacheLeopard has much better correlation with human judgment than BLEU. There are many complexities and subtleties that I need to know, understand, and overcome in order to get good results with neural machine translation. An organization that plans to implement this technology must not only have project managers, translators, and editors, but also software developers with very specific profiles. The three bottom rows is what was always needed. 2 top rows is what they need today, in addition to what we had before. So hopefully, now if you see the statement from an MT provider that most of the translated text don't even need to be edited, you can see the problem with this statement. Of course, everything has to be reviewed. The best practices of Salesforce presented on MT Summit this year disclaim this statement. The pie diagram on this slide demonstrates the LogiPM quality profile that tells you exactly how much has to be edited in an MT output. It's a very clear profile. We are ready to share this methodology and approach with all the interested parties. Already shared it, in fact, by publication. In a new study, which was presented last summer on MT Summit, researchers from Karlov University in Prague have repeated experiments initially conducted by Philippe Cohen on SMT engine, where they used a series of SMT engines with degraded quality to measure the gain of post-editors. In the initial experiment, a clear linear dependency has been found. The better BLEU of an engine, the less time is needed for editing. This experiment was carefully now repeated with neural MT engines, and important conclusions were made. We did not find any significant relationship between the produced output quality and MT system performance. Translation from scratch was not significantly slower than post-editing. The link between MT quality and post-editing time is weak. Compared with post-editing of SMT, post-editing of NMT is much more difficult. NMT does not demonstrate post-editing improvement with increase of BLEU. Fluency hides errors of meaning and does not correlate with adequacy. We need to verify accuracy errors, which are hidden traps. Post-editing is mentally much more challenging than editing human work or statistical MT. Light post-editing does not make any sense because text is already fluent beyond bad translator. Editor must be subject matter expert and have good command of language to be able to fix literal mistranslations. Publishing unedited NMT may lead to damages and legal consequences, is detrimental to the brand. Translator deals with black box with many unknown variables: quality of the training data, quality of the model, lack of ability to improve or even diagnose problematic patterns. As a result,
I'm sorry to interrupt, Serge. We only have 5 minutes left.
As a result, the resource requirements for an MT post-editing has to be good translator with SME reviewer skills, good editor. It is true that overall productivity increases, but not that much, and resource requirements are getting more and more demanding. The consequences of under-editing, as Arlo Lomel puts it, the parrot problem rears its head. Those who will not pay proper attention to the translation quality will have no more good TMs. There won't be data to train model with. And of course, to prevent this from happening, you still need to work with professional TSP and how you have to read. Now you have to read 100%. There is a problem with data. It's not enough to just collect translation memory. The data needs to be taken care of, cleaned, quality assessed, matched by domain areas, etc. Previously, we could see data on translation memories. Now we have to do a lot of work with them. And this is a new cost, new requirements, new tools, and new skills of labor. One of the implementation difficulties is low volumes of good training data available. I'll skip this slide. There's no time, and almost finished, but here's the plan for another 60-minute presentation, risks for clients. You can replay and watch it for yourself. LSPs are also facing a lot of problematic consequences. The price pressure, tighter deadlines. Those who want to develop this technology will have to spend a lot of money. Mastering this technology will take much more time and money than translation memory. And there is, of course, the resource crisis. And the last slide is the conclusion. We're 10 levels up in the game. This technology requires building complex solutions which revamp processes completely, require new skills from language and engineering professionals, impose new requirements, calls for new professions and new and higher skills, new tools, require significant investment and resources, as well as deep understanding of this technology and its applications. Objective view and new skills and approaches will help. Thank you for listening. And here's my email, our website for questions.
Well, thank you, Serge. I think you gave us 3 presentations in one, so detailed and well-researched. Thank you. Let's see whether there are any questions from the audience. I can see one already. It's from Mark. Are you aware of any regulations or regulatory guidances that relate to the use of MT in terms of data protection, privacy, and/or the quality and readability of the output?
Not to my knowledge as of today, but obviously this is coming.
Okay, let's see. If you have any questions, you can also raise your hand. Okay, and Mark has another follow-up question. And what was the reference to the Russian scientist whose work was interrupted by the mysterious appearance of a case of vodka? Because he says he's not Russian or a scientist, but he has had a similar experience.
I'm happy that from this presentation, this slide catched attention because I love this story. It's actually, they're my best sci-fi writers, and they have really, really deep stories. Yeah, that you can replay and we'll see the reference to the story. Yeah, that is the one of their best, I think.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Let's wait for a second. If someone has questions, you can also raise your hand, and I'll open the microphone, and you can talk directly to Serge if you prefer. Will you be sharing the slide deck with the participants,
yes.
Serge?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Excellent. And of course, the recording is going to be online, so everybody can rewatch it. And if they have any questions, they can send it to you. All right. That's another question here. Would MT application to translation studies curriculum incentivize popularity among potential students? What do you think?
I hope. I'm not a prophet and don't have a crystal ball, but I hope that as hype will subside a little bit, people will realize that this is a technology with certain limitations. And in order to apply it correctly, you need to understand these things. And of course, that will make basically all the linguists now have to understand some basics of data science. because you have to understand how this machine is built in order to work with it correctly. Why I focused in this presentation on the saying that this is not AI, this is not AI, this is not AI. This is not a negative thing. It's a positive thing, because it's a machine that has to be fine-tuned, and it does not give you the best result in all situations. Again, there are very quite a lot of constraints that have to come and play for you to get the good result. In some cases, we have evaluated the different language pairs, for example, and the results were exceptionally good for certain language pairs. And sometimes you wonder why the result is so good for certain language pair. The answer is the data was used in training, and the neural network has already seen this content. That's why it gives you good result. So you need to understand these things, and of course, I hope that the popularity, the hype, not the hype, but the appeal that the neural technology is with the young people will make them to go into this field, not with the disregard for language, but with the respect for language. And if these people, new people, young people, will become a linguist with the data science knowledge, that is going to be really added value to the industry and humanity.
Well, thank you. That was very good. So it's 6 o'clock in my part of the world, 9 o'clock somewhere in the morning somewhere else. We have to close the webinar, but thank you so much, Serge. It was very interesting. And another big thank you to all the attendees. We would appreciate it if you could take a minute to give us your feedback. As soon as I close the webinar, you'll see a post-webinar survey. Please fill it in and let us know, because your feedback will help us refine our webinar program. And before you go away, I have a small announcement. We just launched the Gala Academy, which is a series of quarterly events. And the first one will start on February 1st. It includes 4 sessions once a week. And the topic is sales in a connected world. I encourage you to take a look at our website under the section events, and you'll find more information. The next webinar will be on February the 10th, and it's a sponsored webinar on the challenges of translating typesetting files, which also is something that's been unresolved for a long time. So again, thank you, Serge. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day or a good evening, and I hope to see you soon at another Gala event.
Thank you,
Bye,
everybody,
everyone.
for attending this session. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.